sat through this once before, so but I'm going to go back to ground zero for that purpose. However, so where we're going as a ministry sits inside a larger umbrella of a new category for us, which is called NextGen, which stands for next generation. Not really that tricky. But for the first time ever, we're actually going to have a connected system from 0 through 18 that includes children and parents. Woo! Love that. So there are no more 4 silos. Even though we're going to have different approaches inside of them, there is now a NextGen umbrella over that. So from this point forward, when we hire things, they'll be inside of one team working on behalf of all of those units. So when we were looking at making this switch, we knew we needed to fix that. We needed to stop siloing as individual ministries. And we knew, actually technically for us right now, it's 4 ministries, but the way that it comes out, it's like preschool, elementary, Club 56, and then junior high and high. We'll still have 4 wings underneath there, but it'll be preschool, elementary, middle school, and high school. That'll be the wings. But when we went to go talk about how to fix that, there were just some deeper questions to ask. That if you pull back and you look at what we are expecting a children's ministry to be able to do, or a youth ministry to be able to do, are we getting out of it what we want? If we were to say, I would expect the student that came in here at birth and graduated at 18 or graduated whatever, they would have these characteristics, or we would see this off of them, or they would head these kinds of places, or they would have these paradigms about life. Are we seeing that? And if we're not, who is seeing the results that we want? What ended up happening was you could go one way or the other, because sometimes when you take this sort of a view, you go up to 30,000 foot altitude and look down. What it felt like to me was actually just digging deeper and deeper layers. What actually makes that thing happen? Because when I look at our children's ministry and our youth ministry, I see us doing the right things. I see us talking about God. I see us loving kids. I see us participating in worship. I see us being together every single week. I see us planning ahead. I see us using curriculum that is Bible-based. Like, we're doing the right things. So I didn't really realize how many layers down it was going to go. And what ended up happening was we were looking at some church trends over here that had nothing to do with children's ministry. At the same time that we were doing this dive into what makes a thriving family ministries or NextGen team, and they ended up dovetailing together. And I didn't see that coming. That didn't look like parallel tracks at first. So here's some of the things that we spotted in the various journeys. One was, it seems that churches, us included, kind of defaulted to an idea that the more you know, the more you'll love God. Like that seems to be a common. A good Christian is made through really good education and a lot of obedience. So specifically what I seemed to spot in the children's ministry wing of things was we had this assumption that if you would know your Bible, then you would love God. And because if you know God, then you would just love Him. And if you love God, you would obey God. And then your life would be awesome. And then that's how we would define a good Christian. And that all seemed great, except for it put the emphasis on really solid Bible knowledge, which there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with that, but lots of Bible knowledge. But because we can't get inside of people's hearts to see how well they know God, or really to even know if they love God, is that whipped cream? Like 30 seconds of whipped cream?
Maybe. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, it is flat, so it's hard to know how much it should be.
Right.
So you want to know what 8th grade is like? I think we're hearing it.
Since we can't see the middle 2 steps out of those 4 steps, know your Bible, know God, love God, obey God. We can't see the middle 2. How well do you know God? I can't really see that. How well do you love God? I can't really see that. So when we would figure out, are we doing a good job with our students, it's like, well, do they know their Bible really well? That would be what we would think, okay. And then how's their behavior? If they're not making stupid choices, if they're kind to people, then they must love God. That must be the thing. That doesn't seem to be holding water. And so when we went to go look, okay, if we're not looking for a Christian education system, if we're actually looking for an approach to children's ministry that turns out the kind of God-loving Christians that we desire for our kids to be, what criteria are we looking for if it's not, wow, they made the Bible not boring, or wow, they made the Bible digestible? Because it seemed also like curriculum, our big hope was to take a super complex topic and put it down into words that were age appropriate. Who has a landline?
We
Silas.
never use it. I don't know why we get called.
Oh, yeah.
I had Silas turn the ringer on because I needed to get a hold of him today.
We apologize for technical difficulties. So it seemed like we would take Bible themes because we want our kids. It was like we assumed that if they were born in our church and they graduated at 18 with us, that they needed to know the whole of their Bible. They needed to understand that. So somewhere in the midst of us and them being in our Sunday school program, they would need to hear all of the Bible stories and know how to digest the whole Bible. But, for instance, this current curriculum that we have, you guys don't feel this maybe as much as the preschool department does, but that whole idea of being on the same story at the same time seemed great for families. In theory, that seemed awesome. But in reality, what was happening was we were discussing topics in preschool that should never be spoken of in preschool. I don't care how small words you make. There are some themes of the Bible that don't belong in preschool. So anyway, what ended up happening was as we kept digging, we realized there were some assumptions about what children's ministry should be capable of that really children's ministry isn't capable of. And one of the things that had come out is if the church takes on Christian education, like our job is to educate students about the Bible, then all of a sudden we have aced families out. So we had slowly over time, and I don't just mean New Life, I mean overall the church in the last 50 years, as we have watched families get busier and busier, instead of figuring out how do we partner with a busy family, how do we take the Bible and boil it down into a way that families can actually chew on it together during the week, what we started to do was just take more and more responsibility onto ourselves. And it was like, okay, families, you go out there and you feed them and you get them to school and you help them with homework and you do that stuff and we'll take on their Bible part. But God was never meant to be a once a week conversation. And we've accidentally taken on the role of families. So as we kept digging down, we realized some of these assumptions are just not. No wonder it's not cranking out what we had envisioned. It makes a lot of sense. So we went to go see. At that point, all we knew was a whole bunch of problems. This is about a year ago. It's like, that's not working. That doesn't work. That won't work. I don't want that. It was really just a whole bunch of problems. When we came across this thing, Orange, which I think by now most of you have heard that phrase. When we came across this thing, Orange, there was a whole bunch that we resonated with it for. For one, it made no bones about the limitations that the church can have. I can't remember the stat now. Some of you were in a conversation. It was like, you spend less time with your students in our program in a year than the average family will spend together in their car in 1 month. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, okay, we can't be their sole spiritual food. That can't be a thing. Like, we don't have enough time. So I love the fact, two things come out of that. One, by Orange recognizing the church's limitations, it sets appropriate expectations. What can we accomplish? And if we only have this much time, how do we make the most of that time? And out of that, they've become crystal clear on what their goals are. Crystal clear about what our goals are. And we'll talk about that a little bit. And two, it puts the onus back on the parents. And in the past, when I've seen curriculum that put the onus back on the parents, it was almost in a defensive, judgmental sort of way. We can't be expected to do this. This is your job as a parent, which just heaps more guilt back on parents who are struggling to figure out how to find time for all of it anyway. What I loved about this was in putting the onus back on parents, they absolutely took on the responsibility of equipping parents. If we know parents are pressed for time, if we know parents are uncomfortable with spiritual conversations, if we know parents aren't sure the appropriate child development approach, then something we can do as a church is empower parents. The first time I read through any material by Orange, a light bulb went off for me that every other curriculum I'd ever read for Sunday school, every other curriculum I'd ever read, it was clear that these people loved God and they were trying to make God digestible to children. The first time I opened Orange material, it was like, oh my gosh, these people love children. And they happen to love God. But it's instead of like, how can we bring God here? It's like these people embrace child development, and it's like, how can I show you that? It's a complete reversal. So in putting the onus back on families, it isn't that, good luck to you, this is your job, don't expect any more out of us. It was actually, how do we partner with families to understand where their children are developmentally? Which is why, when you guys said, I want to talk about what 8th grade is like, they said, we got to talk about that Facebook, because this curriculum isn't turning out Sunday school material alone. They are child development experts who have figured out how to approach students in such a way that, what the word I would use is woos kids. Is it okay to actually entice kids to fall in love with God? Because most Sunday schools you step into, and ours has been this at times, it almost seems like it is up to them to find it to be fun because this is the right answer. I'm telling you the right answer, and if you're annoyed with it...
Please enjoy it.
What?
Please enjoy the right answer.
Right. As opposed to, let's talk about what you find is interesting, and let's show you the parts of God that reflect that. So one of the things that they've done that I also resonated with was after studying child development, they split the 18 years down into chunks, and they said, okay, in this chunk, here's what these kids are fascinated by, here's what they want to talk about anyway, here's what they find funny, here's all the stuff about this age. Now, what about God do we see in the Bible that would resonate with this age group? And we're only going to talk about those things. And we're just going to talk about them over and over and over again and keep them lively and engaging and fun. But let's not try to get the whole of the Bible in their 18 years. Let's talk about what would engage kids with God and just enjoy that during that season of their life. And that's a huge departure. This whole, we won't go chronologically or we don't need to go comprehensively, is a complete departure from traditional children's ministry and curriculum. But the backbone of this thing, I would say it's a really big deal about church being engaging, like a really big deal. But that's more like the face of it. What's your first impression? So their environments are a little bit like Disneyland. They are in the preschool department. As you walk down the halls, there are things to be touching and twirling, things that make sound effects, like it's hands-on progress. It's a little bit like Disneyland. So it's a really big deal. Each week has a feel, not that you had to be there last week. There isn't, because some curriculums assume that you're at church every single week. That is not, there is no assumption, but the feel of it is almost like your favorite TV show that you don't want to miss an episode of. It's got this momentum building, you want to come back kind of a feel. That is a major departure from the average curriculum that we found. But the real backbone, that's the face of it. The real backbone is this whole concept of relationships. And this was where a key piece of where our research and church-wide trends as well as children's ministry sort of came together at the same time as the research we were doing about our youth group. Like, what is it going to take to get our youth group past 25 students? The research that we were doing here, this concept of how powerful relationships are. How do you build them in a quick manner? If you've got a week, an hour a week, how do you build them quickly? How do you build them strongly? How do you make them actually safe where kids would share what they've got going on. How do you make it so that they start fostering relationships with each other? Because that's also, we are not finding that. I don't know, maybe the zone is beating that odd, but Club 56 is not finding that. Alive is a little bit, preschool for sure not. That when you ask kids, it's your birthday, who do you want to have over for your birthday? They're not necessarily picking their church friends. They're picking their school friends. There's nothing wrong with the school friends at all, but the fact that they're not developing friendships inside their church is a huge caution flag. That is a huge, that can't be right. We would say the same thing about adults. If you were regularly coming to church, but you just remained as a guest and you never fostered any relationships that went outside of Sunday morning, you're in jeopardy. That's a little bit alarming. Same thing for kids. So what is it that actually helps foster these relationships with each other, with the adults, making safe spaces, that kind of thing? And they have that sucker down to a science, like down to a, here's what your schedule needs to be like, here's what role you play on Sunday morning and you don't play. So let me just switch over to one of the side effects of this philosophy. Right now, you guys have switched to this interim system, which is lowering this, which is great. But both preschool and elementary, the amount of pressure of what needed to be included in the Sunday morning, how much you needed to prep was pretty stinking demanding. The cool thing about this is the program, when you walk in and you observe it, it just knocks your socks off. It is like, what? People do this? And they do this every week. This is not a special event. This is every single week. Knocks your socks off. But inside of it, the job descriptions are laser beam focused. So if you're a small group leader, which is not even a thing we have now, we split up into small groups, but
you have to prep it yourself. You have to know what if you don't know who's going to show up.
If you're a small group leader, that is what you do. You are a big part of the greeting team, and you run, like when you go out to large group time, you stay with your small group. And when the large group leader says, okay, I want to know, get your group to stand in by height. Get your group to stand by height. The small group leader is right there with them, enjoying the game with them. They're not up on the stage. They're like, you're with them all the way through. The small group leader is not trying to tell the story. They know what the story is. They know what their small group discussion questions are. They're not trying to figure out how to be a good storyteller. They don't have to figure out how to stand on a stage in front of the kids and lead songs. Like, they've got to be able to cut loose a little out in the audience with their students, but it's laser beam focused. The people that are storytellers, they just hone that craft. That's what you do. You're on that team. That's all you do, over and over and over again. So, that was one of the things that I loved, was the overall output is like nothing we have ever done. Amazing. But it's not harder on the individual person. Each of us has something that's in our wheelhouse that we are learning to do better and better, and we're doing it, and we're not doing it alone. I love that too. So you probably can figure out the math, that if the end result is way awesome, but the job descriptions are not harder, it's just a lot more people. However, recruiting to what you guys currently do in the zone is a nightmare. Who has the balls to do what you do? Like, nobody but you guys. It's so hard to recruit to what you do. It's not that hard to recruit to a drama queen to go up there and tell a drama queen. Be a drama queen. It's not that hard for a quiet soul who just loves kids to say, this is what you do. You don't have to be that quiet soul and then pretend that you're a drama queen while you get up there and lead worship. It's a lot easier to recruit to. I'm not going to say it's easy. I had to pit my stomach on the way over here. Like, oh, we have so much recruitment. It's a lot of recruitment, but it's a lot easier recruitment because the job descriptions are zeroed in on a type. You know, there's a type. When you read the job description, it's like, oh, I know people like this. It's a type. When you read your job description currently, it's like, I know teachers like this. Like, that's it. Nobody else. That's it. Except for the parents that are like supporting on the side. It's
right, but they're it's a rare person who does not do that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, in the classroom that is willing to undertake it,
especially take the lead, especially. Okay, you and I. Sometimes I forget what I have said previously versus what We've talked a little about the problems that we saw that led us to these questions. We've now talked why orange, both paradigm as well as some logistics. Is there something else you think I should?
I think timeline, because we've now
Okay.
called our system the interim system, which means
Okay.
there's an end to it.
There is. So I can't give commitments because that just seems foolish So we are praying and planning towards the end of. All right, so in order to enact this, we have a couple of things. We have spent months trying to get to know it, to understand. We can't, when we went and observed it, it's like we have to cut corners. We can't do all of this. There's no way. But I was terrified. What if we cut corners and we cut the heart out of this thing? That was really scary to me because it's not necessarily like they say, okay, no problem if you want to pare it down to here. Turns out they do, but we didn't know that. So we spent months. We did a whole bunch of research trying to figure out what could it look like here. So that's what we have been doing. What the next phases are getting together training teams, people that understand this, that can actually help train us on how to do it and train the new recruits that are coming in. It's going to require a little bit of a paradigm shift for our entire church. Orange makes no bones about the fact that it is everyone's responsibility to empower the next generation. So there's a whole church-wide component that Kevin will be leading the charge on, which would include kind of like a ministry fair, where we would have job descriptions and visible org charts, and I have a vision in my head of literally being able to see it, and as someone comes up and says, okay, I'm interested in something, it's like, good, put it up there, so you can like start to see, kind of like a fundraising thermometer, where you can like start to see it change from red to green. Like, uh-oh, to, hey, got it. So probably a little bit of a ministry fair would be my guess, then a whole season of training, and while that's going on, we have room overhauls to do.
That is misleading. Major construction.
Yeah, like tearing down walls and things.
Reconfiguring our spaces.
Yeah, this is such a Tetris. This is such a game of Tetris because we're only talking about the orange side of things, which is preschool and elementary. But on the other side of this umbrella, we're using Young Life for middle school and high school, and it's based on the same exact paradigms. It's just a different approach because orange is Sunday morning based, and we don't even have the rooms, like right now we barely have the rooms to handle what we have on Sunday mornings. So we needed to find a system that we could do that had the same heart behind it, but a different approach. So that's not even discussing. So over here we're starting a completely new board to get Young Life up and running, and then Young Life would take our middle school and our high school and meet their needs. So that's the use of the secondary, and like there's all kinds of. Also, Orange has some very specific needs. Obviously, stage needs is one of them, but storage needs is some of them, and check-in is a really big deal, and flow of traffic and all that kind of stuff. So she's right. It's not just like, oh, good, new paint on the walls and some new furniture. It's like full-on construction. Currently, and I would love it if you would be praying about this, but we are doing some work behind the scenes to figure out how much budget we can actually have towards this, but we would really like to use a consulting company. There are companies that do this. After we got our contracting work done, so if we decided what we wanted and we tore out walls and we made this wall a half wall and installed that, whatever. After that is done, they come in and they take your theme, or they help you develop your theme, and they do what they call cosmetic, which is like literally climbable trees, full-on, full-scale elephants that, like one of them that I was in their building, they took this sharp corner and they turned it into an elephant whose trunk was sitting out, like you could hang on the trunk, whose trunk was sticking out the side, and it softened that corner and made it interactive. I mean, she fully was a mama with a baby. She fully had scaly skin and the whole works. Like, there's companies that do this. So that is Kevin's dream. That is our dream. It's just a matter of what can we afford? But yeah, she's right. It's major construction. So that we would hope to be doing in a January time frame. That's what we would be hoping for. So that February could be our soft launch. February, March could be our soft launches. So trainings are happening in here and all that kind of stuff. So that February and March, we can try this on for size before Easter hits in April. where a bunch of people will come see that for the first time. We would like to have our AV teams know how to, do their thing. Because, I mean, it's things like their sound effects to go with the storyteller. Like the story is going, and like the sound effect needs to happen.
How's it go?
Nope, couldn't do that twice. So, it's the kind of thing that if production doesn't come off, you can't just, the production has to come off. It has to come off. So, we would have a little season in there of being able to do some dress rehearsals. That's not necessarily a long-term need, but for us, as we're finding our way in there, some dress rehearsals will be necessary. So that gives us February, March to do that kind of thing before we go full board April. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know what to tell us about when those trainings would start. We have a training person that I am super excited about.
Our next meeting is actually going to be the last Sunday of August, right after second service. That's our round 2, where we kind of delineate out the parts of Orange, which talks about large group and small group, and the org chart, so we can kind of begin to see it come to life, what those job descriptions look like, what kind of stuff we're talking about. So a little more this is the big picture of Orange, but that is more the nuts and bolts of it. So
Labor Day weekend?
No,
the
first
last
week of
Sunday of
26th.
August. Mm-hmm.
Got it. Cool.
So that event should pop up tomorrow
On
on
Facebook?
Facebook. Mm-hmm.
Okay, is that what you're hoping
That's what I
for?
call it.
Yes, good job. You're very good at that.